let's get to the demand science kind of stuff, because I'm really excited to get your take on this. And I'm not sure if you've coined this term or not, but the topic that I hear you, sharing a lot about is this idea of dark social. And then there's this other term, dark funnel, which I think has a different meaning, and sometimes they're wrongfully used, interchangeably. But I'm curious, what is happening in the B2B marketing world today around this idea of just like darkness in general? Like you mentioned the old playbook isn't working anymore. And I totally agree. I'm curious, what is it that's breaking down? And can you talk a little bit specifically about dark social and what you're learning there?
The evolution of marketing technology started around 2007, and it hit a real like accelerant between 2012 and 2015. And during the initial development of those tools and products, the internet was simple. I would argue that they were built for Web 1, not Web 2. So they were built for Web 1, which is desktop buying journeys with websites and email and Google search. And that's how it got built initially. And then they pushed into the market that you need to track and attribute everything because at that point in time in 2009, it was easy to do that. The internet was simple. It wasn't complicated. Like the privacy policies weren't there. And so it was way more simple to track digital activities that people did for you. Also, the way that the information that buyers had was limited. They didn't have access to their peers. They didn't have tons of information on the internet. So they needed to engage with your sales rep early in the buying process in order to get the information they needed in order to make a buying decision. And so we've taken that mindset from I think 2012 would be a gift, right? I think that'd be a nice statement, 2012. And now, given the evolution of what's happened now, like most of the things that buyers do today were not available to them or they were not doing just 3 to 5 years ago. Yep. We're not using Slack communities with their peers. We're not in Discords. We're not using Reddit. Probably we're not consuming content on LinkedIn. We're not doing Zoom meetups with their PE or VC firm as a CMO group or things like that. Did not have access to their peers. So the only time they saw their peers or experts were once a year when they went to the conference and saw them speak or met them at the bar. And now look where we are 5 years later. People interact tens of times daily, every single day with their peers, figuring out what are my peers doing, what business priorities are they solving, what tools are they using, what problems are they dealing with, what people are they hiring, what are their goals, what are their benchmarks, what are they measuring, and they're collecting all this information at scale with no tracking. And so what this has done is it has fundamentally changed how you need to measure and execute marketing and how you need to think about marketing broadly. Because before, the company took control. The company took control and they said, I'm going to force you down this journey so that I can track it, so that our sales rep can talk to you most of the way, because I'm going to hide information from you and things like that. And over time, what the internet has done is it has made all that information available so that the customer is now in control, not the company. And if you as a business are not adjusting to this reality, you are in trouble. The buyer has control and fighting it is not going to happen. And so for the past 5 years, what I've been doing is while every other company fights, I get the insights directly from customers, not from Gartner, not from a quadrant, not from stuff like that, by getting it directly from my customer. And I know most people are not insightful enough to ask the questions and source the insights and interpret them in the same way that I can. So it just creates a really interesting advantage.
Very cool. That's very compelling. And my sense is that, and you've talked about this too, is we've confused this notion of demand creation and demand capture. And sometimes we use some tactics that should be more on the capture side. And we're wondering why are things not why are we not scaling leads appropriately? Can you talk maybe just about how you see those two separate worlds and kind of why it's important maybe to separate them from a tactics perspective?
The way that the technology has evolved has been heavily weighted to measuring capture demand because it creates a very easy ROI story for B2B companies, right? If you're trying to get the success of a podcast and you're trying to use HubSpot to measure it, or no knock on HubSpot, anyone, Visible, Dream Data, any of them, if you're trying to measure the success of a podcast that way, it's going to show you that the podcast doesn't work because it was built to measure SEO and email and other easily trackable digital activities. And so for us, for instance, like when we ask customers, we find that our podcast and community and social drives 97% of our net new revenue.
My
But when
gosh.
we measure it by attribution software, it shows 0%. And so there's just a huge gap between how companies standardize their measurement, which, by the way, was just made up in the early 2000s, or late 2000s, early 2010s, was just made up by
Yeah.
vendors. But this is how we measure marketing. But if we rewind back, like, marketers get the best information from focus groups, customer research, primary like market research surveys, and other things like that, where you go out and you engage with your customer directly and you source those
Yeah.
insights qualitatively.
Well,
And so, from
that's what I was
a
gonna ask. To get to that 97% number, are you just asking them? Like, and it's a crazy concept for us to just ask the
crazy
customer, "How'd you hear
concept,
about us?"
even for me, I've been seeing this effect in the real world since 2017. People would convert. I'd look at attribution software, and then I would ask them, and they would tell me something different.
Huh.
And it still took me a long time to connect the dots. So we actually didn't implement this until last summer in 2021. And to our knowledge, like, the main use case in B2B, or the first main use case in B2B, which is that on our main conversion form, where all of
Mhm.
our revenue passes through, greater than 90% of the revenue passes through our main conversion form, our website, where you book a consultation call with our team.
Yep.
We had a field that said, like, do you have any notes or things that you want to share? And we removed that and we put a new one in that said, how did you hear about yeah, how did you hear
Mm.
about us? And then the customer, basically, like, the things that we get, I, saw your CEO speak at this conference and then started following you on LinkedIn, and now I'm on your website. I
Yep.
got referred to you by someone in Dave Gerhardt's community. We get LinkedIn a ton, right? So you
Mm.
get it's a free text box required, right? So there's no drop down
Required.
menu, and some customers will write a paragraph of data, and our sales team uses that as a way to qualify the customer.
Mm.
So if people come in and they say that they are short with it, or they say, I heard about you on a blog, that typically means that they're not going to close. And
Huh.
when a customer comes in and says, I've been listening to your podcast all the time, or puts a, like, wink emoji or something like that when they describe how they convert, that's a really good signal for our sales team that they use to then prioritize, how am I going to route this lead? Who are we going to route it to, and how are we going to handle it?
Yeah.
So
Super interesting.
the idea is that businesses, because of how they've measured marketing, everything they've tried to do to create demand for the past 10 years looks like it doesn't work, so they don't do any of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is why the media entity doesn't take off with many companies, because the standardized way to measure B2B marketing will deem that a failing program, not
Right.
because the program is failing, because the metrics are flawed.
Yeah.
So we need to come up with a different way to measure what is actually creating the demand. I've provided a really simple, effective framework that we use and more than 30 of our customers use. And I hear stories of tons of companies. I get in the DM every day. I heard about this thing called self-reported attribution from your podcast. We installed it. Game-changing insights is the key thing that I hear. I quote from people: game-changing insights, and it's helped us change our marketing strategy, lower our customer acquisition costs, keep doing programs that we knew worked but couldn't prove. This is what my business is focused on, right? There's a core problem. Attribution is broken. It's
Yeah.
causing us to not be able to do these things. And we're able to come up with an effective, so what, like, right? Source the insight. But the key thing is, so what do I do about it?
Mhm.
And so we've had multiple innovations on this front, and ended up here, and interested to continue, as you mentioned, in the science, just like getting this
Yeah.
down to a science. So,
That's
yeah.
great. Very, very compelling.